The first is that it is a matter of public record that Dr. Hloppe lost the status as a judge of the High Court of South Africa as a consequence of a finding of gross misconduct by the Judicial Services Commission.
As far as the ACDP is concerned, the prospect of a nominee who was removed from judicial office for gross misconduct, sitting on the very body that made that finding, is, in our view, plainly wrong.
We are strongly of the view that it is neither reasonable nor rational to elect Dr. Hloppe as a representative of the National Assembly on the Judicial Services Commission. The second reason why Parliament should not elect Dr. Hloppe is to be found on the grounds I've just mentioned, if you listened, Honourable Member. The second reason why Parliament should not elect Dr. Hloppe is to...
So this video features an intense debate in the Parliament by DA Chief Whip Judge Michalakis, arguing on the reasons why John Hloppe shouldn't be nominated to sit on the Judicial Service Commission in South Africa. Let's listen to his argument for this reason, and I'll be back for some really interesting analysis on this matter.
Are there any objections? I've noted the DA.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The DA objects, and we wish to do a declaration in terms of Rule 108.
An objection having been noted and request for declaration requested, I will now ask the parties in the following order to make their declarations. The DA. The time for declaration, honourable members, is 2 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, we expect to receive a lot of criticism when it comes to the vote because of our decision to force a vote on this matter, given the long-standing practice that when a position is allocated to a party for representation on other forums, it is taken as the prerogative of that party.
Excuse me, order, honourable members, I'm sorry. The time for your declaration, as it has been agreed to before in the Rules Committee, DA, is 5 minutes.
Continue?
5 minutes, you can continue.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Given the long-standing practice that when a position is allocated to a party for representation on other forums, it is taken as the prerogative of that party to decide who will represent the National Assembly. We also expect the argument to be made that for as long as an individual is deemed to be fit and proper to serve the National Assembly, you are consequently fit and proper to represent the National Assembly on other forums. However, in the current context, there are 2 reasons why this process should not continue today. The first is that it is a matter of public record that Dr. Hloppe lost the status as a judge of the High Court of South Africa as a consequence of a finding of gross misconduct by the Judicial Services Commission. The decision to be taken today is furthermore not merely a political decision, but the exercise of a public power aimed at contributing to the establishment of the very same Judicial Services Commission. In the circumstances, it's a legal requirement of the National Assembly to act in a reasonable and rational manner. We are strongly of the view that it is neither reasonable nor rational to elect Dr. Hloppe as a representative of the National Assembly on the Judicial Services Commission. The second reason why Parliament should not elect Dr. Hloppe is to be found on the grounds I've just mentioned, if you listened, Honourable Member. The second reason why Parliament should not elect Dr. Hloppe is to be found in the constitutional obligation which we as members of the National Assembly enjoy to assist and protect the judiciary in order to ensure its independence, its impartiality, its dignity and its effectiveness. Madam Speaker, even if the majority today holds the view that any person who is fit and proper to be a member of Parliament is fit and proper to be a member of the JSC, it must follow that a large number of applicants to be interviewed by the Judicial Services Commission going forward will object and apply for the recusal of Dr. Hloppe on the basis the finding of gross misconduct renders him unfit to serve on a body that is determined to fitness, that is to determine the fitness and the propriety of others. Madam Speaker, this poses the risk of paralyzing the JSC and tying it up in endless review processes. If we are to assist and support the judiciary, Madam Speaker, we must today refrain from exposing the Judicial Services Commission to this risk. The DA cannot vote to put Dr. John Hloppe on the JSC. Thank you.
Sorry, ACDP?
Thank you, Speaker. Speaker, the judiciary is a crucial part of our constitutional democracy due to the extensive powers the Constitution vests in our judges, which also guarantees its independence. And this makes issues of how judges are appointed critical to the strength of our constitutional democracy. In this seventh administration, the process of appointing a new Chief Justice and a Deputy President of the Supreme Court of Appeal, which began before the elections, will need to be finalized. This is in addition to other appointments. And as we know, the JSC plays a central role in this process. Now, the JSC itself has been the subject of much criticism from various judgments and civil society. It even had to rerun interviews. So we in the 7th Parliament have the opportunity to strengthen this key institution and address the shortcomings that exist by ensuring that its members are at the very least committed to the rule of law and the constitutional democracy. While Dr. Hloppe is highly qualified, and I know him personally, whilst there is no legal impediment to today's nominations constitutionally, as far as the ACDP is concerned, the prospect of a nominee who was removed from judicial office for gross misconduct, sitting on the very body that made that finding, is, in our view, plainly wrong. Those serving on the JSC to appoint and discipline judges must themselves be above reproach to ensure the legitimacy of the judiciary, not only in our eyes, but in the eyes of the public, given, as the Honourable Member from the MK himself said, that judges are not elected in South Africa. And the ACDP cannot in good conscience support today's nominations, as those nominated will represent us and be our voice in the JSC. Clearly, however, and I say this with the greatest respect to the Honourable John Hloppe, that the legal lacuna that exists needs to be addressed, either by a constitutional or other legislative amendment, to address this legal issue, this legal lacuna, which, in our view, it is ethically obvious. It is Ethics 101. I thank you.
Thank you.
Brilliant. What do you guys think? The whole issue with the former Eastern Cape judge, who was kind of like convicted for certain crimes and all that, and having been nominated once more to serve on the Judicial Service Commission, is quite a tricky one in South Africa. I would agree with the DA party's Judge Michalakis, but also the MK party also has some set of arguments also that actually also bring to fore a lot of issues on South Africa's judicial system. But anyway, I thought that I put together a really series of articles to help us really understand where this whole case is at the moment and really understand why it is a really important case for South Africa. So we know that the MK party's nomination of John Hloppe as its representative on the Judicial Service Commission, the JSC, strategically aligned with the desires of its electorate who sought defiance, contempt, and disruption, right? Now, this nomination was not only politically shrewd, but it's also entirely rational from the MK's perspective. We know that conversely, the decision has been met by jubilation, especially by those who believe and purport to believe that the achieving peace, economy, and social equality and universal freedom necessitates the dismantling of the judiciary and the establishment of a political system that grants absolute power to a preferred political elite, especially those who perceive law, facts, and reasoned arguments as adversarial. All right. So we know that this elite group in South Africa actually promises to wield near absolute political power ostensibly for the benefit of the powerless and the marginalized, positioning themselves against both real and perceived enemies of the people who are actually interpreted as corrupt elites. Now, it says that this pledge is also despite the fact that prominent figures within the group, most notably Jacob Zuma, have previously used their political influence primarily for political gain and personal gain, benefiting a corrupt Indian family, I think that would be the Guptas now, and also various capitalist sponsors who supported their political careers and opulent lifestyles. Now, unsurprisingly, Freedom Under the Law, which has diligently worked to hold Hloppe accountable for alleged gross misconduct over the years, announced its intention to seek a High Court review to overturn the National Assembly's decision. Now, Freedom Under Law, alongside several other civil society organizations and legal experts, they actually contend that the National Assembly's endorsement of Hloppe's nomination is irrational, unconstitutional, and invalid, primarily because it is likely to erode public confidence in the judicial appointment processes. Okay? Now, there's no doubt that Hloppe's involvement, especially in the selection of judges, would probably further tarnish the reputation of the Judicial Service Commission, JSC, thereby undermining public confidence in the judicial appointment process and the judiciary as a whole. This situation may also deter political candidates for judicial positions or promotions from applying, fearing character assassination by a commissioner known for making severe but unsubstantiated allegations against fellow judges, including some of the most senior black judges in South Africa. It says that South Africa must not forget that the Judicial Conduct Tribunal's ruling, which found Hloppe guilty of gross misconduct and emphasized its duty to protect the integrity of the justices of the Constitutional Court, particularly Chief Justice Langa, Deputy Chief Justice Moseneke, Justice Nkambide, and also Justice Jafta, whose reputations were undermined by Hloppe's baseless and scurrilous attacks. Now, he says that these justices also acted honorably to uphold the institutional integrity of South Africa's republic, South Africa's highest court. Now, it says that despite these concerns, many legal commentators are not certain that a court will or should invalidate the National Assembly's decision to endorse Hloppe's nomination to the JSC. However, arguments that the National Assembly's decision was irrational is legally plausible, and it is questionable whether this issue is fundamentally a legal problem that the court is best suited to address. It notes that, nonetheless, the presence of political appointees on the Judicial Service Commission serves a crucial function by introducing a democratic element into the selection process. This helps to minimize the risk of establishing a judiciary that is either completely disconnected from the democratic sentiment or actively working to undermine the elected departments or branches of government. Now, the 6 members of parliament, who are the MPs, and 4 delegates from the National Council of Provinces, NCOP, who serve on the Judicial Service Commission, they represent the interests and ideological perspectives of their political parties, and at least theoretically of the citizens who voted for them. When a political party, whether it's the DA, ANC, EFF, or MK, is allocated a position on the Judicial Service Commission, it will naturally nominate an individual who best represents the party's interests and viewpoints. Preventing a party from doing so would disenfranchise the citizens who voted for that party, especially those who might have supported MK precisely because of its propensity for defiance. And a significant aspect of the MK's existence appears to be like a vehicle for its leader, and also to exert kind of like a soft revenge on its adversaries to further the agenda of overturning the constitution, as Jacob Zuma usually speaks about. So it is evident that no court order will put an end to Zuma and his MK party's campaign to undermine and delegitimize the judiciary. But anyway, that the campaign would persist regardless of whether Hloppe serves on the JSC, as long as the party's message resonates with its voters. This is an inherent challenge of democracy. If a party garners enough votes, it gains a platform, even if its message is perceived as dangerous. Now, the party responsible for this action, that is the MK party now, received 15% of the vote in the recent election, representing a significant constituency whose views are entitled to representation on the GSC by the MP of the party, by an MP of the party deemed most effective in executing its course, which includes efforts to delegitimize judiciary, right? So anyway, it says that this does not imply that the courts should refrain from invalidating unconstitutional decisions. Thus, when critics contend that it was the National Assembly rather than the MK that acted irrationally by failing to veto Hloppe's nomination, the strength of the legal argument should be carefully considered. And also, to determine the rationality of a decision in the constitutional law, one must assess whether the impugned decision was rationally related to the purpose for which the power was conferred. And that the crucial question in this case, therefore, is the purpose served by the provision empowering the National Assembly to designate 6 of its MPs as members of the JSC. One could also argue that the purpose is to ensure that the socio-political views and major concerns of citizens, as reflected by the elected representatives of political parties with substantial electoral support, are represented on the Judicial Service Commission during the selection of its judicial candidates. And now this rationale allows political parties entitled to representation on the JSC to choose which of their MPs should occupy the party seats. Conversely, some might argue that the National Assembly's purpose, in designating 6 members to the JSC is to assist and protect the courts to ensure the independence, impartiality, dignity, accessibility, and effectiveness of the courts, which is an obligation imposed on all state organs, including the National Assembly and the Judicial Service Commission, according to Section 165, subsection 4 of the Constitution. All right. So he says that if the latter is correct, that is, freedom under law's review application may actually succeed. Consequently, it wouldn't be surprising if the decision is reviewed and set aside. While such an outcome would be welcome, it also raises concerns about the precedent that it might set. So anyway, this is an article by a law practitioner who really speaks about, this issue with Judge Hloppe serving at the Judicial Service Commission and arguing that, the whole thing with representing different ideologies on the Judicial Service Commission is actually something that is democratically, required in a democratic system where, regardless of how bitter and regardless of how erratic and unpredictable an ideology it might be, as long as a portion of the electorates actually vote for that ideology, it demands representation on the various organs of government. And the JSC in South Africa is one of those that require such representations. And now we see that the MK party has put forward together what Floyd Shivambu usually described as a Cambridge PhD holder, John Hloppe, to represent the views of the MK party on the JSC and actually push forward the agenda and the mandates of the voters of the MK party and what they represent, especially at the level of the GSC. But we know that this has angered the DA party, and I'm suspecting that the Freedom Front Plus, because their values are really in opposite directions and that they're unable to work together. So that's what we would have for this video. What do you guys think about this whole case with appointing John Hloppe on the Judicial Service Commission in South Africa? Share your thoughts in the comments.